we ready? Hi everybody, thank you very much for coming to the very, very first Ecotricity Young Green Briton debate. Sorry we had to move it, but it kind of made sense during the course of the last 24 hours when we realised it was going to pour with rain. So we're lucky to have this undercover space, and thanks very much for coming over to see us here. This is the first time we've run this debate, and it's quite important to us because it was born out of running a competition. It was a competition to call for Young Green Briton champions in the areas that we talk about within Ecotricity, which is a Green Briton. And those are energy, transport, food and nature. And we have today our competition winners on the panel, either side of Jon. I've just got louder. Alongside that, we have our mentors that Jon will introduce. Now, the mentors, if any of you came to the Green Briton chat last year, were our speakers on the panel, and we thought it was very apt to bring them back. And they have been speaking to our Young Green Briton panellists, giving them a bit of advice, support, to enable them to give their view of how we can create a Green Briton. I do hope that you'll do all you can to encourage and support them through this. We will be asking and encouraging questions when the panellists have spoken. So I'll hand you over to Jon, who yet again is our chair. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Jon. And let the show go. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen, very much. And it's great to see so many people here on a rather grim morning. But this is a very exciting moment because what we have are 4 young people who will have to live with the consequences of the way we've treated the planet to this point. And it's the first time we've done this. After last year's event, Ecotricity was very keen to give the stage over to the next generation, possibly the real experts in terms of how we can create a greener Britain. You may not be aware, but each of these talented young people on the stage have earned the place by winning the competition that Helen mentioned, run by Ecotricity, to find the most inspiring young person between the age of 11 and 16 to represent the 4 Green Briton themes. Today, we're going to hear their views on some of the challenges. They're supported by Dale Vince, founder, Ecotricity; Robert Llewellyn, actor, comedian, writer, electric car fanatic; Geetie Singh-Watson, founder of the Duke of Cambridge Organic Pub, and now a major force in Mr. Watson's company, nothing like marriage, and Simon King, wildlife television presenter, cameraman, nature enthusiast and expert. Thank you all very much for coming to WOMAD and coming back here and being such a great support to our panellists. I think when we get to the question and answer stage, you've offered to help your Young Green Briton champions. And let me introduce then our panellists. Megan Hanson, here, marvellous. She's representing energy. Megan is 15. She goes to school in Portsmouth. She's extremely passionate about protecting our environment. In her words, it's the only one we've got. Nerys Pickup is 15. She's representing transport. She's at George Pindar School in Scarborough. She attended, gosh, I went to Scarborough Tech. How about that? I did, I got my A-levels there. Yeah. Nerys is 15. She attends George Pindar School in Scarborough. She entered this competition because she would like to see more people thinking about ways to improve their way of travelling in a more eco-friendly way, also to show people there are better and smarter ways and more eco-friendly ways, and in the long term, a cheaper, cleaner, carbon-free way. Noella Usbourne is representing food. Amazingly, she too is 15. She lives in the Cotswolds. She attends Thomas Keble Secondary School in Gloucestershire. She entered this competition because she feels she's got a lot of things to say. And I can say I've heard quite a few of them already, because she and I have been having a good chat. She entered it because she feels she's got a lot to say and many ideas to present on the topic of making Britain a greener place, with this being the perfect opportunity to do so and to influence and get feedback from you, our audience. And last, but very far from least, Findlay Wilde, representing nature. Findlay is the baby of the bunch. He's 13. He lives in a small rural village in Cheshire. He attends the county high school, Leftwich, and he describes himself as a young conservationist and ornithologist. He entered the Young Green Briton competition because he wants to make sure the voice of his generation is heard. Again, in his words, everything we eat and drink, everything we have in our homes, everything we use to travel around involves taking something from the natural world. So he wants to turn the tables and make sure we start giving back more to nature than we are taking. We need to be thinking 500 years ahead, he says. Megan, we'd like to start with you. You want a greener Britain. To start by changing people's perceptions of energy, tell us about some of the issues we currently face relating to the energy we use here in Britain.
Well, first of all, I think people don't understand the effect that it has. I mean, everyone knows that burning coal and burning oil causes global warming, but it seems kind of in a different place. Like, you're here in England, that happens in the North Pole and the South Pole. It isn't really to do with you. But it also releases so many noxious gases that can cause many respiratory illnesses, and that harms you at home. Airborne pollution is the third biggest killer in the UK. It's quite scary. And I don't think people kind of give it a chance. Like wind power, you always get the arguments, oh, it's a new technology. No, it isn't. The first electric-generated wind mill was made in 1887. That's not new. And then it's ugly, is it? I'd much prefer to live next to a wind farm than like a coal power station. But I suppose personal choice. And also people seem to label nuclear energy as renewable. I don't really understand why, because uranium isn't renewable, and what are you going to do with the waste? We've already got too much nuclear waste. You can't, it decomposes over thousands and thousands and thousands of years. That's not environmentally friendly, and that's not a good way to generate power, yet the government still feel the need to put money into the industry and take money away from the green industry. It seems that it isn't talked about. I mean, if we look back to the election in May, no one really mentioned about green energy. I went to my local hustings with the MPs, and there was one question asked, but no one, not even the Green candidate, really talked about it. Shouldn't we be engaging in this, especially as young people, and talking about what we can do to help and how we can generate it? I know money's a big problem, but if we have the money available, we should invest in things like solar panels for our houses, but also on schools and community buildings. And I think that would help, especially on schools, because then you could teach the children how to make a better impact on our environment, and how to kind of come away from the big six energy providers, because we have enough wind in the UK, believe it or not, to generate enough to power ourselves and be self-sufficient. We don't need to buy our energy from EDF and Scottish Power. We could do it ourselves. But also, if the government stopped investing in the fossil fuel industry and they gave everyone a level playing field, onshore wind would be the cheapest option to generate electricity. Yet they still feel the need to make new power plants. I think it needs to be talked about in pop culture. We need to have people in newspapers, we need to have people on the TV, we need to have people doing talks everywhere, just telling people how this makes an impact on them, and not just the polar bears, not just the penguins and all the cute animals, but them at home. And it would make their bills cheaper in the long run, because at some point we will run out of coal and we will run out of oil. And if we don't start investing in these new technologies now, then what will happen then? What will happen when it does run out?
Megan, thank you very, very much. That was a great presentation. Terrific. Now, Nerys, you're 15 and you're attending that school in Scarborough. But I also know that even though there are hills in Scarborough, your dad perfectly happily drives an electric car, and he's also a big fan of Robert, who also drives an electric car. So we've got a lot of electric cars around here. And you're going to talk to us about transport.
We can improve sustainable transport by educating people. But the impact of burning fossil fuels is that it gives off unwanted byproducts known as carbon emissions. It's known to have a great impact on our environment. Burning fossil fuels is one of the many causes of global warming. If we keep going like this, we'll be facing serious consequences in the near future. Also, burning fossil fuels is non-renewable, and in years to come we'll be facing an energy crisis if we continue to use it unnecessarily. Firstly, we need to start educating people about electric vehicles and teaching the benefits of driving and powering electric-powered vehicles. Also, different ways these electric vehicles could be powered. These EVs and hybrid vehicles can be charged by hydrogen, wind, solar, wave energy that could turn into electric energy. The difference with oil-burning vehicles is we only have one source of energy, which we use so much unnecessary fossil fuel energy. To get more fossil fuel energy, we have to go through extracting it, refining it, sorting it, transporting it, then sorting it again. Then finally, burn the oil in our inefficient fossil-polluting vehicles. At least with electric transport, we can produce several types of renewable energy sources for all our transportation needs, and we don't need to transport the majority of the renewable energy as we do for our fossil fuels. To make this successful, we need to start by educating young to old people and try to change their mindset to show them that there is a better, brighter way, also more cost-effective way of travelling. As you may know, me and my dad have a YouTube channel all about EV and hybrids. Our aim to show other people there is a better way of travelling. The reason my dad chose a hybrid vehicle over EVs is that where we live, there's not a single recharger in our area to support electric transportation. Hint, hint, Ecotricity. What I would like to see, an ambitious roadmap to 100% renewable or at least carbon emission-free United Kingdom. What we need is a radical new way of thinking what an electric vehicle might look like, rather than simply replacing the drivetrain in the car that is designed for fossil fuel vehicles. We also need our towns and cities to run on sustainable renewable energy and efficient buses. We need to start doing this now, or we'll become more efficient and a cleaner society and less heavy dependent on fossil fuels, and leaving a cleaner, carbon-free footprint for the next generations to come. Do any of you own a hybrid vehicle or electric vehicles?
One at the back. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 out of 300.
Geetie's got one.
Yeah, bicycle.
I've got a question for you, Robert. How do you work out the miles per gallon?
All right. Is that, I don't know if that's on. Is that on? Oh, good. The equivalent of miles per gallon, the nearest I think that I've come across is watt-hours per mile or watt-hours per kilometre. So you can, and some cars will tell you exactly how many watt-hours a mile you're doing. And obviously the lower the watt-hours per mile, the more efficient it is, so it's more like a very high MPG. So it takes some getting used to. And not all cars tell you that, and you have to do this thing called mathematics to work it out, and that is way, way beyond me. So I give friends lists of numbers that I've recorded, and they tell me how many watt-hours a mile you do. That's how you measure it.
Thank you.
Could we ask Megan's mentor a question? Because it came up in the adult session yesterday. You were very relaxed when I said one of the problems is there's no PowerPoints. I said it's okay, and we're almost fully connected from John O'Groats to Land's End. But you've missed out Scarborough. A whole town without no charging point.
My bad. Yeah. What we did, we focused on the motorways first, and we started about 4 years ago when there were no main road charges in Britain. By the end of this year, we'll have done every motorway service station in Britain, but our logic is just that that's where electric cars need them the most, to take long journeys, and most people that have an electric car can charge up at home. It was just a question of where we went first, so we went to the motorways. We're extending down the A roads. We've done some airports as well and other key locations, and I'm sure we'll get to Scarborough. It'll only be a matter of when.
How do you charge it? I mean, you've got the guy, he just has to put a wire over the gate through the front door.
No, you use a plug-in vehicle. Like if you have Robert has either Nissan Leaf or a Tesla, you could just plug it in, wait for a while, go for a coffee, and it will charge for you. And it's more eco-friendly way of doing it.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. Noella, you are representing food. Tell us what's going on in terms of food and what the challenges and the impacts are.
Well, unlike those two, which are modern introductions to our lifestyle, transport by cars and, energy, electricity, food has been around forever, since we've existed. So not many people think there are some issues because it's not very modern, but there are plenty of issues concerning food. And when it comes to food and the production and transportation industry, there are many more issues than you would think. Personally, I think one of our biggest problems is ignorance, not to be confused with stupidity. A lot of people are just not aware of all the problems concerning food. They don't know the behind the scenes, as it were, of the food that they're consuming. I saw a really good talk on TED Talks by Helena Norberg-Hodge. I don't know if any of you saw that. It was on the economics of happiness. And she was comparing our society to a drone culture, which essentially means she compared it to those, and I'm sorry if this is quite untasteful, but the unmanned drones that Americans sent to Afghanistan to bomb, no people in them, and so they wouldn't be able to see the effects of the bombing. And they're halfway across the world, and they wouldn't be able to, really feel what their impact is doing. And our culture can be compared to that. We are so distant from the different aspects of each other that we cannot even see the effect or the relationship between two factors. And in this case, the consumer and the producer. We are distancing ourselves so we don't even realize where our food is coming from. If we were aware of where our food was coming from, that whole meat scandal, the horse meat, wouldn't have even happened years ago. It wouldn't even happen because we would know what's going inside our food, and we would know exactly what's going inside our bodies, which I personally think is a very important thing, knowing what's going inside of you so you know how, you should really be connected with what's going inside and how it's relationship with what's coming out of you, essentially. This distancing between ourselves and our food is, in my opinion, caused by rapid development and the increase in our population and the demand for food and our inability to adapt and include sustainability and caring for our planet in the food industry. So I'm going to list and elaborate on a few more issues concerning food, which most people are just not aware of. Overfishing is a huge one. Overfishing in the sense we're going to fish too much, and overfishing in the sense that we're going to catch huge batches of fish and generally destroy wildlife in the process. The first one is easier to explain. As our world population increases, pressure only increases on fishermen and fisheries. And if we catch too many fish, Populations of fish will decline and collapse, and seafood will be rare. This will have a huge impact on our world's ecosystem, especially the ones in the oceans. Whole species could be depleted. Your children might not even be able to know these species exist. Ecosystems are a tight chain, and if one goes, all goes. Tiny things affect large structures. Bycatches and trawling is when fishing companies drag huge trawlers across the ocean floor, trying to catch as many fish as possible, and essentially throwing back the ones that they don't need because they have no commercial value. It's not even limited to fish. Many fishing companies accidentally trawl in albatrosses, seals, porpoises, dolphins, and there's no way I can stress how destructive and wasteful this process is. Next on my list is intensive farming and monoculture, the sort of farming that you hear about. And I'm not a farmer, so I don't see the deep effects of intensive farming, but I know enough to understand the basic impacts. The basis of intensive farming is to plant the same crop in the same field over and over. No variation, no diversity, in constant use, fields at a time. Without putting crops on rotation and leaving it to do its own thing, it makes the plants in the soil more susceptible to disease, and it also decreases the land's mineral value. So with time, we can produce less food of an even lesser quality. The soil gets exhausted. Eventually, the land will be stripped from all its minerals, and even if this takes decades to do so, it's irreversible. Even grass will refuse to grow on this land. We haven't even mentioned the problems with chemicals in non-organic farming. The soil gets so used to all these fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides, that you eventually have to use harsher and stronger ones. And if it rains, the chemicals will be dragged to the nearest body of water, like a river. And if there's wildlife nearby, especially organisms that are making that river its home, they will get deeply affected by these harsh chemicals. The next issue is very close to me, literally. And the town I come from is the world's first bee guardian town. Bees are on the decline. And we, as humans, have disconnected ourselves so much from nature that we don't even recognize the importance of bees in our world. You know those tiny, tiny insects? Apparently, they have a huge impact in our food system, and half the people I know have not a clue. One tiny species plays such a huge role that most of us are oblivious to. Bees in England are our main pollinators. The main ones that help our food reproduce. They are part of an essential food chain, and they are one third of our food would not be available without bees. 1/3. Without bees, we are stumping our future's progress and erasing 1/3 of our diets. In addition, bees pollinate many of the flowers of the plants that farm animals like to eat. So again, it's all linked, and we don't even realize this because we're so disconnected from all the impacts. Pesticides are damaging the bee population, and even though the most lethal ones to them are currently coming to the end of a 2-year ban, some farmers threaten to use even more harmful ones than they currently do because of this neonicotinoid ban. The final issue I'd like to highlight is inefficient and rabid consumerism. We as a species demand so much when it comes to food, and in the most inefficient way possible. We ask for so much meat, for example, and did you know it just takes 2 to 10 kilos of plant produce to produce 1 kilo of animal, when we could just eat the plant. I'm not saying that everyone should be vegetarian, but I'm saying that we as a consumer, we're not necessarily to blame, but there's actually so much we can do to tear down these inefficient and wasteful ways of eating and producing. We have inefficient systems, and if this consumerism is putting so much weight and pressure on it, we really need to do something about it.
Thank you very much indeed. That was really brilliant. You're a fine communicator. You'll do well on telly. Noella, thank you very much. I'm feeling guilty about that bacon cheeseburger I had yesterday. I'm going to mend my ways. Thank you very much indeed. Findlay, and you made a film, I think, for party leaders building up to the election. You are really on about nature. Talk to us.
Okay, so we've lost 50% of our world wildlife in the last 40 years. Just think about that for a moment. 50%. It's a statistic that really frightens me and should frighten all of you as well. The UK's wildlife is always pushed to the bottom of the agenda, especially in political terms, which is a problem in itself. Housing, economy, energy is often considered more important, which happen all around the UK in small pockets, but add it together, it becomes a much bigger problem. As the population increases, more and more houses are getting built. However, many companies are forgetting there are thousands of houses currently unoccupied, and extensive building is leading to thousands of acres worth of habitat loss, and a lot of this land being used is on greenfield land, rather than brownfield land, which I would rather see used. It isn't just houses, though. Many roadside verges are being cut, demolishing wildflower pockets, which are vital as corridors for insects such as bees and butterflies to travel more extensive distances for food and produce future generations of those species. Roads themselves aren't always a problem, as they offer a perfect place for the dispersal of flower seeds, as the draft and wind from traffic helps disperse these seeds large distances, but only if the plants are allowed to grow. There are many factors causing species decline in Britain, but the main ones include pollution, urban growth, persecution, and intensive farming. Recently, I've been doing a lot of work with raptor persecution, or wildlife persecution in general, and a good example of what actually goes on is the persecution of a bird called a hen harrier, which last year only had 4 breeding pairs in England, when science says English moorland should support over 330 pairs of hen harrier. But it's not just hen harrier. Many other species of wildlife are poisoned, shot, and trapped. And why? For money. To allow red grouse to be reared on the moors for people to then go and shoot. Hen harriers may well go extinct as a breeding species in England this year, and that disgusts me. Intensive farming is also having a large effect. The continuous use of pesticides is one of the main factors linked to the bee decline. Pesticides are also having a large effect on predators as well. Bioaccumulation is the buildup of chemicals in an organism which builds up to a greater value in a bigger organism and will eventually kill it. And of course, pollution affects nearly all aspects of the environment, including things like increasing CO2 levels, dumping of chemicals into our waterways, and litter. Litter especially has a massive impact on all our wildlife, land and sea. Many species get trapped in items of litter, and turtles, for example, eat plastic bags in the sea, mistaking them for jellyfish. Another issue for nature is that not enough people seem to care. I don't feel that the general public know enough about the impact we are having on the environment. They don't seem to understand that if the bees all die, we all die too. It's as simple as that. Everything we have, we take from the natural world in some way. But what do we give back? What do we give back? This take culture has to stop. We all need to be raising awareness so more and more people can get involved in protecting wildlife and the environment. The public don't know enough about the damage being done because they can choose whether to listen about it or whether to read about it. And too many choose not to. Our planet is slowly dying in front of our eyes. Politicians are thinking 5 years ahead when they should be thinking 500 years ahead. When I watched the party's leader debate, I did a survey to see what words were mentioned the most. But shocked me was the words mentioned the least. Nature, climate, environment. What sort of example are they setting? Thank you, John.
Findlay, that was remarkable, and you're only 13. God knows where you'll be at 20. Findlay, just tell us about this film that you subjected party leaders to.
Well, after I'd watched the leaders debate, I was really shocked about the fact that to politicians, wildlife and the environment is completely at the bottom of the agenda. So I did this video to try and raise awareness to politicians, to make them realise how important the environment is and how it should be considered in all aspects of every policy, new idea that people come up with.
And have you got a website?
I do, Wilde About Birds.
What is it?
Wilde About Birds, Wilde with an E. It's my second name.
W-I-L-D-E, Wilde?
About Birds.
About Birds.
All one word.
Yeah, .com.
.blogspot.co.uk.
Blogspot.
Yeah. It's quite complex.
No, it's good. Wild About Birds. Is the film on there?
It is, yeah.
Excellent. How long is it?
I think it's about 4 minutes.
That's perfect. Perfect. Good. Well, we'll all visit that. Well done indeed. Now, your 4 dangerously good panellists are very happy to take questions from the floor. The lighting isn't very good, so you may have to put your hand up very high. But there is a hand here. Thank you very much, sir.
The old fuels are running out. We're in crisis about that. The new sustainable energies, wind, tide, sun, are all ours anyway. Isn't it time to take back energy into public ownership? Even ecotricity. Ecocentricity sounds even better.
Right. Well, that's an interesting one, Megan. Who should own energy production?
Well, I think we should at least take it away from the big providers. We should. I think more people should get solar panels and support wind turbines, and we should take it back for ourselves. Because, I mean, if you use the Earth's resources, then that's everyone's, isn't it? No one can own the wind. No one can own the sun. I think it should be public.
Do you want to check with your mentor?
Yep, I agree. I've called for the renationalisation of the energy industry before. I think that energy is just too important to us as people and as a country for it to be in private hands and driven by a profit motive, which is often short-term. And, you know, we need big investments. We need to think forwards. As Findlay said, we need to think long-term, invest for the future, and private companies just can't do that. They work only for their shareholders. We are the shareholders in this country. We should be of the energy system, and we need to go back to a nationalised way of doing things, I think.
Thank you.
Talk about raising awareness, and that's absolutely right. People do need to be more aware. But what can we do in the face of a government which seems to be waging war against social and environmental responsibility? For example, the recent Green Deal being taken away and things like that.
I think we need to protest against it. I think people just kind of take it. They think, oh, well, it's happened, so we'll just have to deal with it. I think we need to kind of lobby against them. We need to talk to our MPs, especially with the carbon tax on green energy. I mean, there was a great quote saying it's like apple juice paying an alcohol tax. It's absolutely absurd what the government's doing.
Can I answer this one as well? I think we as people, we need to stop relying on the government and keep asking them to do our stuff and start with ourselves. Start with a fundamental change with you and your family. And I think small things like organic farming, the organic farming has come about because a surge of people have felt like that was their moral responsibility. And I feel like if you want a change, you rely on the government because they have power, but you start with yourselves and you start with everyone around you. Start with your morals.
Noella, from where I'm sitting, I can see the word steak, sausage, various other things. What I thought as you were speaking, actually, was could you just tell us what we should do about lunch today? But no, I mean, you're not at home, so you can't make your own. So what should people be going around this tented encampment looking for lunch?
Well,
Vegan paella we're offering.
WOMAD is very eco. Is a very eco festival, and plenty of the food places, if you notice, they all say, ethically produced, vegan paella, as you said. And there's plenty of places. You just need to look and become aware of what's going in that food, and read the signs and eat what you want to feel like your morals. Eat what you feel like your morals agree with.
Right, there's a lot of questions here. There's one down here in the front. No, you've got one lined up here, and then one here.
Hi. First of all, I just really want to thank you. I think it's wonderful what you're doing, and I feel a lot more hopeful now than I did when I woke up this morning. So thank you so much for that. I just want to introduce the issue of social justice and social injustice. John, you've already mentioned what is perhaps the biggest social injustice, and that's what my generation is leaving your generation to deal with. But I was also struck with how social injustice didn't really feature in any of your presentations. The fact that people who contribute least to global warming are the first to feel its dire effects. And I wondered if you felt that fundamental unfairness and communicating that strongly as well would be a way of engaging more young people like you.
Anyone?
Nerys, do you want to have a go at that, Nerys?
If you put it on the curriculum, make it compulsory that you have to learn about how to make it sustainable, how to do most things like save energy, try to find out how to lower your own carbon emission, how to get around, how to provide eco-friendly energy, how to provide food, how to look after our nature. It has to be compulsory in our schools.
Very good. Yeah.
I agree. A massive reason is the lack of any compulsory education in the schools. And in my belief, I'd have environmental compulsory lessons in school. So the school curriculum is packed with all sorts, and a common argument I get to do with the environment is that there just isn't enough time for a subject based on the environment. Or religious studies, design technology, even dance in my first year were all compulsory lessons. But what I think is, what could be more important than learning to respect and look after the natural world that gives us everything we need? If I could change one thing right now, I would make an environmental-based subject compulsory for all secondary year students. I'm not saying that everyone would fall in love with the environment, but they would learn in depth about the impact the human race is having on the planet, and encourage them to make the right sort of choices now and later in life.
Can I Can I just get this English teacher say just one thing?
Right, let's go for that.
Hello. So I'm an English teacher in West Dorset, and as an English teacher, I try and get out and about and take my classes outside and find how poetry absolutely can link to the natural world. I mean, if you think about John Clare, he is actually a really valuable record of things like pine martens being far south in the United Kingdom, for example. But I really feel that within the constraints of the curriculum, I do not have time to explore these things, and I would really like to be able to, especially as the curriculums are changing and the government are introducing all kinds of things. And I'd just really like to know from you, as young people who are currently being educated, I think that's fantastic. I do absolutely agree with maybe an environmental subject as part of the curriculum, but how do you feel currently? Do you feel that actually everything you are doing is outside of school and that you're kind of forced to...
I feel like they're making the wrong subjects compulsory. I think they need to focus on the world we're living in. And I also feel like school has a tendency to make things not interesting, and I think we've got to begin with everything, not just school, but with your children. You need to take, everyone needs to take responsibility because we share this world.
Very good.
I think we also approach subjects in the wrong way. I think it was Finland. They're trying to, instead of doing particular subjects, have topics, because people are taught subjects, but then you ask the question, well, why do I need to know the quadratic formula in my job? If I'm just going to work in a clothes shop, then what use is it to know how to solve the sides of a triangle? But we need to be taught it so we know how it's going to affect us. We could have a whole topic on the environment, and you could fit so many subjects in there, and then everyone would know how the subjects will help them in the real world, but also you would learn about the real world as well.
You talked about reducing meat intake, but I was wondering what you thought the most efficient way of producing meat is, because obviously there is an issue with intensive farming at the moment, but I've been learning about it at school, and intensive farming is the most efficient way of converting energy into meat matter. So they do things like reduce the movement of animals so that more energy can go into meat rather than movement.
Yeah.
When we're in an energy crisis, what do you think about that?
I think intensive farming, the negatives outweigh the benefits, and I think we're under this kind of lie that intensive farming is the only way we're going to be able to keep up with the demand for meat. And I personally, this is a personal opinion, I personally believe that if intensive farming looks like the only way to keep up with our meat demand, stop having a demand for meat, because intensive farming is not good.
Where does that lead us? No meat at all?
I'm not saying that. Just while the systems of producing meat are inefficient, we need to stop putting weight on them and asking for it. While we should be taking responsibility and thinking, well, if the systems are inefficient, maybe I should stop being a consumer of that particular system and start being a consumer of something that looks like a better, efficient system.
Maybe start with meat once a week?
Meat-free May.
What about your mentor?
Yes, I think.
Oh, yes. I was actually, first of all, I just want to say I think you're brilliant. You're amazing. You're really smart at answering these questions. And when it comes to meat, we could eat wild meat, those rabbits that are shot and buried, and the deer, the pests. That's a good way of eating meat. Grey squirrel, delicious. Cockroaches. But I absolutely agree with Noella. I run restaurants, they all serve meat, but it's about reducing the amount of meat you serve and making vegetables far more important. Vegetables should be the star. We should eat more green, but certainly not start farming in an inhumane way for animals and an environmentally unsustainable way. It would be absolutely the wrong approach. Just reduce our meat consumption. You're spot on, Noella.
But maybe we should ask Simon about non-organic farming and the use of all sorts of sprays in order to produce good greens.
I want to echo how impressed I am by all of your responses. I think it's hugely inspiring, and I have to say it gives me hope and optimism, as the gentleman out here mentioned, so thank you. As Findlay rightly said, everything that we're discussing is underpinned by the natural world, absolutely everything. It's the bedrock of it. And to refer specifically to what's happening with carbon fuels, I'm coming to the point in a moment, but we're set to run out in about 50 years, more or less. If you just talk to the big oil magnates, that's what they ambitiously say, and rather proudly say they've still got in reserve. 50 years is your lifetime. You're going to be roughly where I am. And you're going to have to look around and find other systems now to make sure that there isn't a monumental crisis. And what we've got currently, of course, is borrowed sunshine. What we also have is the real thing. And it all has to scale according to what's hitting the surface of the Earth. The natural world's been doing that ever since the planet came into existence. That's why there's life on Earth. And our fabulous nearest star, the sun, is doing it all for us. It's the only energy we have. It's the only energy that's in the ground. And it is what supports and underpins absolutely everything. And that includes the food that we eat, and specifically the food that we eat. We are set, of course, to face a major international crisis with food and water within 50 years or so, simply because the energy we put into producing food is unsustainable. The only reason we're at the prolific number of human beings on Earth that we currently are is because of borrowed sunshine, is because of carbon fuels. And by the time we get to the point where we're working with existing energy, i.e. the wind, the sun, it all comes from the sun, of course, we all know that, we're going to have to scale. And we're going to have to scale looking at our human population. And I'm not talking about trying to wipe out vast numbers, but I am talking about not looking for growth in an economy as some kind of grail mantra that we drive towards on a daily basis. The very word growth, the very word growth, of course, refers to a natural phenomenon. And it only goes so far until it breaks. And we will break. It will break. And I'm embarrassed that I'm in part responsible as a generation to hand the baton on with a breaking system. And I'm really embarrassed that I've lived through listening to politicians say, not currently, but in the past, I've heard this said, we have the opportunity to hand on a budget sheet, and we're referring to the natural world here, not money, in a better condition than the one we inherited. And it just simply hasn't been done because of the short-termism. And coming back again to Findlay's reference to looking to 500 years and not 5, we absolutely have to. We absolutely fundamentally have to. So to meat, can you eat meat? I eat meat from time to time. And this comes down to the value and actually, that's the single most important word, I think, value. What value do you put in the very things that you depend on? And if you just look at the value of everything that you put in your mouth and how much it's worth to you, how much it's literally cost the earth before it gets to you, it will absolutely cause a paradigm shift in your eating habits. And if it's one chicken a year and it's a treat, and it happens to be an organic one that you happen to have running around in your back garden, then maybe that's the only meat you should have, if any, at all. And that's not talking about the moral issue, it's talking about a fundamentally environmental issue.
Thanks very much. Robert, I just wondered, there was something which arose from what Megan said, and that was this whole question of, what Nerys said, which was Nerys said. It's about the uptake on electric vehicles. Some countries have got a much, much better record than we have. What would boost Britain's uptake of the electric vehicle?
I think it comes down to such a huge topic. It's ownership, I think, is a very crucial part of it. And one of the areas that is growing very rapidly, particularly in Europe and in some cities in the United States, is the concept of not owning a car. And when people started shouting out bicycles, I'm totally with you. That should be our, walking and bicycles and public transport should be our 3 primary ways of getting around. But after that, what about if you don't own a car but you've got access to one when you need one? And the car that lends itself to that model better than any other is the electric car. And For instance, in Paris, there's hundreds, and I think there is now thousands of electric cars that the residents of Paris, you walk up to the car, put your card on the windscreen, doors open, you get in, you drive it, you leave it where it is, and you go and do whatever you're doing. Someone else will use that car next. It's a much better way of using cars. And we're, very obsessed, and, it's very much part of our culture that we own cars. Well, if you own a car, 90% of the time it's sitting still doing nothing. And it's an absurd waste of a really valuable asset. And so we should move on beyond owning cars and wondering what the car says about us, because 90% of the time I know a car says, I'm a tosser. That's the most common thing. The one I'm in at the moment, the car I drove here today in the moment, it says, this man is a total dick. Because if you saw the car I came in, it's absurd, it's obscene. But it is electric and it goes faster than any petrol one you've ever seen. It's terrifying. I drive it like an old vicar. But so I think we have to move on about that, the obsession. And I'm very interested in the fact that young people, there's less and less young people taking their driving test, learning to drive. The applications for driving licenses are dropping very alarmingly, and believe me, motor manufacturers, and I talk to them all the time, they're really aware of this. And their adverts now are using things like, some of the more advanced motor manufacturers, the ones that do think more than 5 years ahead, are going, people aren't going to own cars in 20 years' time. The next generation won't own them because it's an absurd expense. It's insane. But they'll still use them. And that's how we should use them. We should share them. We don't need them all the time. None of us here need a car right this minute. But it's very handy if you've got one that you know you can use if you need to. So that's really, I think, the big thing. And electric cars are better. Simple as that.
OK, back to the questions. Yes.
Hi. A question that I've been trying to figure out the answer to myself is, how do we infiltrate the mainstream consciousness with environmental awareness and climate change awareness? So the question is to Jon Snow, can we not have a season on Channel 4 which is about these subjects? Because Channel 4 is the mainstream and we need to get on there.
Yes, well,
it's a bit of a silly question.
Yeah. I don't actually run Channel 4, but I mean, you're absolutely right. What I'm hoping is that the Paris summit will concentrate people on talking about the real issues, which, I mean, one of which is us financing developing countries to avoid having to go through the destruction of the planet that we've gone through, so that they can leap straight into the technologies that we are already deploying without having to go through the carbon-emitting destructive technologies that we've gone through. It's very, very interesting to look at mobile telephony. In the developing world, there was very little hardline telephones. Now, in many ways, there are a lot of countries, for example, in Africa, there is India in particular, and China, where in actual fact, mobile telephony outstrips, in some ways, our own. My wife is currently working in Zimbabwe. There's never a moment when I cannot find her. She finds many moments when she can't find me, because I'm in some black spot somewhere where there's no reception. So that could apply to all sorts of technologies. So I will use as much pressure as I can to get them to put on more stuff. More stuff. OK, thank you. Yes, go for it, please.
Well, I'd like to take a bit of an issue with the idea that this isn't taught in schools. I was a science teacher for many years, and in physics, we teach the science of climate change, well, I did, in a lot of detail. And so there is an input on that basis.
Was it compulsory?
It's compulsory in the national curriculum in science.
But once you got there, once you got up to that, those subjects, were they part of the compulsory, or had you already started to refine and people had dropped off?
Well, it's done lower down in secondary school in Key Stage 3, but it's also done at GCSE as part of the national curriculum. And I'd like to say that at the end of a unit on climate change, we should do a little survey about the carbon footprint of the individual students. And it's surprising how many of those students go on long-haul holidays. They go on flights. Now, the carbon footprint of a household per year is a few tons of carbon dioxide. If you go on a long-haul flight, that's several tons of carbon dioxide. That's your contribution, your carbon footprint. And I just wonder how many people here at WOMAD and how many individuals, and also the contribution of WOMAD as a whole, what the size of that carbon footprint is and how it could be lessened.
Can I go back
People
to...
it's very easy to recycle a few bottles and newspapers, but how many people are prepared to stop going on these holidays or flying off to other music festivals?
Can I make a point about going back to the education thing? In schools, we have a system where everything we do is for an exam, and there is no education for life. And I feel like if we're going to talk about environmental education in our schools, we have to teach the kids how this is affecting their life, and not just for an exam.
I totally agree. I mean, students in secondary schools, we are the next generation of environmental protectors. And it's a really, really important thing to get across to the government, because they're the people who put the lessons down, decide what goes into the schools. And, I mean, a lot of people might not think it would work, but, I mean, why do a lot of adults, they still play sport? Because it was taught from a very, very early age. And, environmental subjects, they need to be in school across all subjects.
Thank you very much. Time for 2 or 3 more questions. Yes, one more here.
A lot of the things you've said is like people should go for organic food or they should buy solar panels, but you're not thinking about a lot of people don't have the money to invest in these things. Organic food costs a lot more than if you buy something that isn't organic with pesticides in it. And a lot of the society in the UK hasn't got the money to buy organic food, buy organic meat, buy solar panels, because a lot of it costs a lot more. And it's just, I think you should also think about that. Like, shouldn't we focus on getting people who are like Amazon, who are tax evading, take their money and invest it in the people who haven't got enough money?
What do you think? What's the solution, given that a lot of these technologies are expensive?
Like, if you have like solar panels, you can, by 6 or 7 years, they can pay for themselves because you're regenerating the electricity to put on your homes. So it is a good thing, and it does cost a lot. I will admit it costs a lot, but you'll get back in the time that you have the solar panels.
Can I just say?
I worked out for the 3 solar panels that I've got to be 88 before I'm going to make a profit.
Not for you, Jonathan.
Can I also make a point that plant produce is a lot cheaper than organic meat, like all meat. It's just the plants have the energy and the same amount of, like, vegetables are an important thing. And I think we should stop focusing, or we need to have an organic everything and start thinking, well, what is more efficient than saying we need to replace our diet with everything organic, and start thinking, well, maybe I could swap this meat for a cheaper plant that will help me give the same amount of nutrients that any meat would give, and it's cheaper. So I think we just need to start thinking differently and stop thinking it's more expensive and start thinking of different ways we can live our lifestyle.
Geetie.
Organic food isn't necessarily more expensive. That is a myth. It's a complete myth. But you also have to remember the hidden cost behind intensive farming. You pay for that through your taxes, clearing up the pollution, clearing up the damage done by the pesticides that are destroying our bees. We all pay for that.
But just a minute on the business of organic. I mean, if you go in the supermarket, it's almost invariably about 15-20% more expensive.
Supermarkets put a premium on organic food, and it's how you buy it. So you buy in farmers' markets, buy through veg box schemes. It's by far a cheaper way to buy organic vegetables. Supermarkets put a premium on anything they possibly can. They do absolutely nothing to try and improve our food system, our environmental system. So like Noella's been saying, spend your money in a way that is going to be beneficial to society. And it doesn't need to cost an awful lot more.
Sorry, John, can I add one more point, just one? At the end of the last war, Second World War, about 50% of household income was spent on food, and now it's less than 11%. So if you just, it comes back to what I've referred to as value. What do you think is the most valuable thing you're going to spend your money on? Food's pretty important. It's a good place to start. It's significantly more important than 4K TV.
That would be a dangerous question to ask. How many people have invested in TV provision of Netflix and the rest of it, as opposed to going for organic food? Right, more questions, yeah.
Hi there, we've talked quite a bit about education and disconnection, and I notice that we're focusing very much on the secondary school curriculum. I think it's really important that we're getting our primary school kids involved in these things. After all, we need to capture children whilst they still have a wonder of the natural world, not when they're stuck in a classroom finding things totally boring and staring out the window and not taking these things on board. So, you know, we can't rely on our secondary school education, and also we need to take on our responsibility as parents to get our kids interested in these things. We need to start forming habits when they're young so that these things become natural to them. So what are we going to do about our primary school curriculum?
Let's just quickly run a test on our 4 panellists, the most recent primary educated people present in this room, or in this tent. How much real environmental study do you think you got at your primary school? What percentage do you think of 100% of learning was about the environment?
I think very little, really. I mean, it's almost kind of patronising the way primary school kids are taught. It's like, oh, they won't understand. They won't understand about the climate change. But I think most primary school kids are cleverer than we give them credit for. And I think also, as families, you have a duty to kind of take the kids outside and to play with them. I mean, I think I was quite lucky. I often went to the woods and you run around, and there was a forest near me called the 100 Acre Woods, and I'm a big fan of Winnie the Pooh, so I'd make the Eeyore huts and play around. But a lot of kids don't have that. They just sit in front of the TV or play on their computer games, and they don't really experience how fun nature can be and kind of the effect we're having on it as well.
Okay. What about you, Findlay? How much genuine environmental nature, everything else, was there in your primary education?
There was more than in secondary school, quite considerable.
Is that what turned you on?
No, I've always had interest in nature from a very early age, but I think it's really important to get environmental subjects or learning, hands-on learning, into primary school curriculum, because it's when you are a primary school child, you're still finding your path, trying to find out what you're interested in. And recently I've been doing on my blog a series of guest blogs called 13 Years Wilde, and basically it's about what people were doing, people ranging from CEOs of NGOs to just people who enjoy bird watching in their free time, and about how they if they were interested in wildlife when they were a teenager. And a common theme throughout these blogs was that always between that time period of 13 and 18, a lot of people seem to just turn their backs on the environment. I think it's really important to get environmental-based things into primary schools as well, because that will keep their interest going throughout secondary school.
Noella?
I think it's really important, and in some ways more important than secondary school, to get the education in primary school.
But what did you get?
I got, apart from the extracurricular stuff, which I signed up for, near to none, which is really upsetting, because you've got to build it into their fundamental education. This is important now. People are starting to wake up, and we've got to get it fundamentally into our children. And because primary schools don't have the same kind of pressurized exam system as secondary schools do, you have more time to teach them the important things without having to feel pressured by exam deadlines. So I think it is very important that we get it into primary schools, maybe even more so than secondary schools.
Thank you very much. And?
I
had very little in my primary. Like, we did not learn a lot about the environment. But what I personally think from primary schools, we should start putting it into them, like starting showing them what to do, like taking them out, planting some plants, trying to grow their own food, showing that switch the lights off when nobody's using anything. Like in Pindar, my secondary school, the lights are on most of the times at the toilets, and it's unnecessary because hardly anybody's there during the lessons. It should be like automatic. You walk in, light switch on, walk out, light switch off, and it saves more money for one to invest in our personal education and to invest in different topics.
Well, then, the question I would like just to throw back to our young teacher who asked the question would be, does this perhaps reflect on teacher training? And should teacher training build in what Noella eloquently described as fundamentals?
Hi there, I'm not actually a teacher, I'd like to say that. I'm an ecologist, and I have set up a company that goes into schools and takes children out of the classroom. It's seen as quite a novel thing by the kids at the moment, so it does capture their attention and they love it. But it's just a question of, you know, does that stop once they get to secondary school? They're put back into the classroom, and, you know, we need to make sure that doesn't stop, that it does continue.
Well, unfortunately, we've sort of run to the end of our time now, though we're one of the few dry weather activities that's going on at the moment. But on your behalf, I would really like to thank, first of all, the mentors, Dale, Robert, Geetie and Simon. Give them a big round of applause. And then in turn, Megan from Portsmouth. Nerys from Yorkshire. Noella from the Cotswolds. And Findlay from Cheshire. And I think the four of them have made a contribution which speaks volumes to WOMAD and to the world beyond, which is that there is real hope, real capacity, real enthusiasm, real brilliance lurking around in the next generation. And those of us that wither away on the vine towards the end of our lives, we can count on them, hopefully, to provide us with a world in which we can still sustain. Thank you very much indeed for coming. Thank you. And happy birthday to Jace.